director at Island Crisis Care Society. And so today I'm going to share a little bit with you about what we do at Island Crisis Care. And Christian asked me to tie it in with this series that we're doing, the Songs for the Road. I tell you, that took me probably 4 weeks to figure out how I was going to tie it all in together. But I did struggle, and I managed to tie it together with Psalm 123, which I'm going to read right now from the Message. I look to you, heaven-dwelling God. Look up to you for help. Like servants, alert to their master's commands, like a maiden attending her lady. We're watching and waiting, holding our breath, awaiting your word of mercy. Mercy, God, mercy. We've been kicked around long enough, kicked in the teeth by complacent rich men, kicked when we're down by arrogant brutes. Let's just pray together. Father, thank you so much for your word. I thank you that you have so much for us, that your blessing is upon us when we look to you and serve you. And so, Lord, this morning as we look into your word and look about Island Crisis Care Society and what we're trying to do in the community, I pray that you will give us understanding and wisdom. For we ask it in Jesus' precious name. Amen. So as we've been hearing from this current series, this particular psalm is the same as the others, not lectures. It's the songs that were sung along on the highway. And this Psalm 123 directs us to an aspect of Christian life that is very important, and that's one of servanthood. We have a great example in the life of Jesus. He didn't take the role of a master, but instead he gave himself for others. Eugene Peterson, in his book, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction, says it this way: the psalm has nothing in it about serving others. It concentrates on being a servant of God. Its position is that if the attitude of servanthood is learned by attending to God as Lord, then serving others will develop as a very natural way of life. Commands will be heard to be hospitable, to be compassionate, and to visit the sick and help to heal. Commands that Paul assembles in Romans 12:6-16 and in many other places, and carried out with ease and poise. As we live out the implications of a life of service, we provide with continuous encouragement and example by Jesus Christ, who said, "Do you understand what I have done to you? You address me as teacher and master, and rightly so. That is what I am. So if I, the master and teacher, washed your feet, you now must wash each other's feet. I've laid down a pattern for you. What I've done, you do. I'm only pointing out the obvious. A servant is not ranked above his master, and an employee doesn't give orders to the employer. If you understand what I'm telling you, act like it and live a blessed life." And that's from John 13:12-17. So at Island Crisis Care Society, we consider the poor in our community. And it seems to me that homelessness has almost become like the lepers of our society, people who are experiencing homelessness. NIMBYism has become rampant, and those experiencing homelessness have become almost, like I said, the lepers. No one wants them in their neighborhood. And at Island Crisis Care Society, we're working hard to provide supports and housing and to give people a hand up. And so I'm going to share with you how we are doing that. First of all, I want to talk about why is there homelessness. Well, this sounds simple. There simply isn't enough housing. Agree? Yeah, there simply isn't enough. We've got so many people that need housing, and it's not just Nanaimo. I mean, the estimates are that in Nanaimo there's probably around 700 people without a home. There's people living in cars, seniors. I mean, quite a few seniors we come across who are living in their vehicles. And why are people losing their housing? Well, when I listen to the stories, it's shocking, absolutely shocking. A crisis happens in someone's life. They end up very sick or in the hospital. They lose their job. They lose their ability to pay their rent. And most people don't have a lot of money sitting in the bank for those such things. And they end up losing their housing. We regularly get phone calls at our office from people who, it's a family and they're, going along quite happily. Now the landlord sells the house. Where are they going to go? Because there's nothing affordable in our community. When I hear the stories from some of the people that we serve and I hear what's happened in their background, I can't but wonder if that same thing had happened to me, would I not be where they are today? We hear stories from childhood. I just think about so many stories of trauma and pain in people's lives from childhood, being locked in cupboards to being sexually abused. And all those things continue to repeat through their lives, it seems. And then, if there's a shortage of housing, then what's going to happen? The people with the good reputation, the people with the references, they're the ones that are going to get the housing, right? Not the ones who don't have those things, who have suffered so much trauma. So there's so many reasons of why people are homeless in our community. And then, of course, you always hear it's their choice. They decided to start taking drugs. I want to tell you, so many times I hear how people started using drugs, and it's usually because they were trying to avoid pain. Can you imagine having to sleep out on the street? Michael and I went out last night to try and see if we could see the meteors that are supposed to be around. So we went out onto the field, and we're laying down on the field trying to see. We didn't see much, but it makes you think. Imagine what it would be like to be out there having to sleep in that. It was not too bad last night. It wasn't that hot. But tonight and the days coming, it's going to be extremely hot. To be out there and no place to go into, no comfy bed to have, it really makes me realize what it's like. Actually, probably about 10 years ago, we did a night up in Oceanside. And we went to the community park in Parksville, and there was quite a few politicians and different ones. We came together, and we decided we would sleep outside to get a feel for what it's like. So there's that big picnic shelter out there, and we all supposedly slept, for one night on the concrete under that shelter. You know what the biggest fear for me was? I kept thinking that a rat was going to go across me. I could not get to sleep because I kept thinking that something was going to crawl over me. But imagine if that's your experience. It's just heartbreaking. Everyone deserves a home. Everyone deserves to have a place where they can go and feel safe and secure. So what about Island Crisis Care Society? Our history? Well, back in the early 80s, this is very inspiring, actually. A couple of people from a few different churches in Nanaimo decided that they would come together because there was a need. And so they just said, okay, there's a need for a shelter in Nanaimo. Let's do something. So they rented a home down on Nickel Street. It was a very old home. And they just started inviting people in. Grassroots, they had some sort of a stove in the basement that they would just put stuff in to heat up the house. They started making soup and inviting people in. And we have grown from that to now 13 programs in 7 different locations and serving many hundreds of people every day. And so it just goes to show how just a couple of people doing something positive and saying, yes, we can do this, can make such a difference in our community. Our vision is being the hands of care in the heart of the island. We will endeavor to help meet the immediate physical needs of those who come to our doors, provide affordable housing for low and moderate income households, provide counsel, guidance, and prayer to aid those in need, to develop and provide programs to improve the quality of life for those who seek our help, to recognize that the whole person, body, soul, and spirit needs care, and to bring comfort through the provision of quality Christian care. There's so much in there, and there's so much need in our community that it really is, it's a big job. But you know what? It takes the whole community to come together and to work. And we have an amazing team. We have a couple of board members here as well who serve on our board. And, you know, that's a really amazing thing if you think about it. People who are so committed that they'll step up and sit on the board. We have 6 board members at the moment, and I'm happy to tell you 2 of them are from this congregation. So what does that say to you? Island Crisis Care has been supported through the years by this church, and I'm so thankful for that. I mean, it's just been amazing. So let's look at our programs, all based on servanthood, this issue and the thing that Jesus teaches us. You know, we may be a big organization now, but the heart is the heart of servanthood. And there's a picture here. This really epitomizes what we try to do. This is a tea that is put on, and that's Alexis who's serving. And sitting down there is Renelle, who's the program manager at Samaritan Place. But it's not only Renelle that's being served, but all the clients who wanted to come to this tea. And the whole thought behind it is we want them to feel honored and blessed and to know that they are special. Because when they're out on the streets, they're not treated very special, that's for sure. But we want to serve them and show them that they are cared for. And I want to tell you, you would think that it would be mostly women that would come out to these teas, but it's not. Mostly men. I mean, we get some women too, but I was actually surprised that it was men that were coming out more than the women. And they just loved, you know, the fancy little sandwiches, and we had a strawberry tea where they had little cakes with strawberries and cream on top. And they just love it, and they feel so special. So that's kind of the thing that we try to do in all of our programs. So Samaritan Place, which is on the screen here, 14 emergency shelter beds for women, 51 supported units, 10 rent subsidies, and then meals, clothing, supports for the people that live there. Now, this was the original Samaritan House, which was that original house that I told you about. And 2 years ago, we sold the building, and then BC Housing actually provided the funding to build this 4-story building down on Nickel Street. And so now we're able to support so many more people through this program. It opened last summer, and so it's new, it's a beautiful building, and we're seeing many, many lives being changed. The one thing that is very obvious in this building is the number of people. In fact, we have a whole floor of people with very severe medical needs. And so we have home care coming on site 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, to provide supports for those people. These were people that through COVID, there was special funding to get people with chronic medical needs off of the street and put into a safe place. And then we came to the end of that funding, and it was like, okay, well, where are these people going to go now? There's no funding for all those extra pieces normally. And so could we just, someone with cancer, someone with needing dialysis 3 times a week, could we just put them out onto the street because now the funding was over? No. So we were so fortunate in that we were able to work with Island Health and say, you know, we need these supports. Our staff are not qualified to do the extra stuff that is needed, and so we need a partnership. And Island Health came forward, and we now have this partnership, which is just such a blessing because now we're seeing people. I mean, they may be there to die because some of them are palliative, but imagine the difference of dying in your own place compared to dying on the street, which is what is happening in our society. People with cancer, with so many different things. Imagine if you're trying to go through treatments, you're trying to get help, but A, you have nowhere to go home to even feel safe after a treatment. B, you probably have no ability to even get to the hospital for the treatments. And C, you've lost all track of time because you're out trying to worry about where you're going to go to the bathroom, how you're going to have a shower. I mean, those things are just so real in our society. And I can't tell you how difficult it is for those people to navigate the system. And they already have such a mistrust of the medical system, so it's best if we can bring them in and support them in their own place. What a blessing that is. And I'm so honored that we've been able to work through that process. The next one is Mary's Place. And Mary's Place, we opened, and I just realized doing this that it's 10 years this year, 2013. We bought this house. It's in the North End, and it's 6 beds for women, and it's a substance-free dry program, and it's transitional housing for women. So it's for women who have come out of other programs likely, and they're ready for that next step. It's close to Woodgrove Mall, so it's really nice because a lot of the women there are then able to find jobs at Woodgrove and move on until they're ready for the next step, or until they can find housing, because, of course, that's very challenging. So that's Mary's Place. We also have Safe Harbor House, which is 5 crisis stabilization beds, and this is funded through Island Health, and it's a program for people in crisis, as the name says. Could be any type of crisis. It could be that they're just coming back from treatment and they don't have anywhere to go. So we will put them there until we can find them somewhere. They may be ready to go for treatment. They've gone to detox, and now they're ready to go to treatment. Or it could just be someone who is having some sort of an emergency, a medical emergency, and they don't have a home, and they need somewhere stable just to get their feet back together. We do some respite in there as well. Just that home, loving kind of feeling that you get from a home, and they just kind of come in and they can breathe a sigh of relief. They have their own room, they have their food provided for them, and they have that wraparound 24-hour support. Now, next door to Safe Harbor is the Bridge, and this is 6 supportive recovery units. And we have some longer-term people who have been with us for a long time who live in the downstairs suite, and then upstairs we have 4 bedrooms. And this just provides the longer-term supportive stays. Often people coming out of Safe Harbor will then transition into the Bridge, but it's just a real place for people to get back on their feet, to do some self-work so that they're ready for that next step in their lives. There's lots of programs. I'm getting dry. Next is Crescent House. This was the first of the crisis stabilization. I think actually it was the first one in the province, if not the country. So it was kind of a new idea, and same kind of thing as Safe Harbor, but yet people there might still be using some sort of alcohol or drugs. It's the step before. So we sometimes see that people will come into Crescent House, they'll stabilize, and they'll say, hey, I really want to get some sort of treatment. And then they have caseworkers through Island Health, and they might say, okay, well then the next step for you might be to move over to Safe Harbor until we can get you into treatment. But it's just kind of another way of supporting people. And it's very close to the hospital, so we often find that we get people who are being discharged from hospital. They're not quite ready to get back yet, but they'll be supported, 24-hour staff there. Next is Hearst House, very similar, the crisis stabilization again. But it's up in Parksville. And so anyone who knows anything about the Oceanside area, very, very limited resources. And so this serves a really important part of what's happening out there. And we just celebrated 20 years. We just had a little bit of a cake out in the park in Parksville, and in the same spot where we slept a few years ago. But yeah, just very, very similar program. Next one is Newcastle. Supportive transitional housing. So this was, remember the tent city that we had quite a few years ago and all the chaos that there was around that? So this was one of the places that was put in place in 2018 to deal with that tent city. The crisis situation, and Island Crisis Care was asked if we would do one of these sites in order to get people immediately out of the tent city and into housing. That was crazy, let me tell you. We moved 78 people into these buildings that had no locking doors, no fence, no power, no kitchen, and it was still an active construction site. But it was a court injunction, and there was, you have to do this now and move these people in. It was crazy. I mean, I remember the night before, a whole bunch of us were down there trying to get the rooms clean, make the beds, so that the people could come in. And we did it. We've learned a lot through that process, and we still have 60 people in there right now. waiting for the permanent housing to come. So there is going to be a big time of transition when those people move over into permanent housing. But what we've really discovered at Newcastle is the power of community. Like the staffing team there and the residents, the lives are being changed. Like it really is incredible. I'm not going to tell you that it's easy because drugs are absolutely rampant in our society. I was down there the other day with one of our new chaplains, and the program manager was telling me about this drug that's out there now that she was comparing 5 years ago when we opened to now. And now she was talking about this new drug that's out there called zombie dust. And she said, have you ever seen people out in the community and they're like doubled over like this and they can't move, they're frozen? She said, if you see that, and I recognized once I heard that I've seen that quite a bit, they are frozen, like it does something to their muscles. And she said it's rampant. The overdoses that they're dealing with, it's just so difficult. But yet there is so much trust and community there in that building that it's incredible. I mean, one real prayer request is that as those people move over into the new permanent building that's coming, that one's not going to be operated by us. It's going to be a real time of transition for those people as they move into this new site with new staff and a whole new team. So if you're wanting to pray for ICCS, I pray that's one way that you could help. But in all, it's been a good support to the community. Orca Place is a beautiful building up in Parksville. This is probably the one that was the most challenging to open up. We had, court cases and people out on the streets marching up and down with placards, don't let this place open. I would have to have an escort every time I went to a public meeting out into my vehicle because people were threatening me. I had death threats, so you name it, it happened out there. We had one woman who hit someone over the head with a placard in a public meeting and got arrested. She was like in her 60s. I couldn't believe it. She got taken down by the police officer because she smacked someone over the head, and then when they tried to arrest her, she bit the police officer. People are passionate about what they believe. Why aren't we as passionate about what we believe? So true. And what was that out of? I can't speak against this woman. She was so fearful. This is what I'm guessing, anyway, this is what I tell myself. So fearful of what this place, this beautiful building, would do to her community. Now, this place is, I was told the other day by someone at BC Housing, they say this is the gold standard for supportive housing now. We went through so much to get that place opened, but yet their fears were not realized. Berwick was actually supposed to be, they had bought the piece of property across the road from this building, and when they heard that we were moving in there, they shut it all down and they did this big thing when we're not moving in here, $50 million just walked out of your community. It was like this big thing. And they now, after a year, they realized, hey, this place isn't so bad. These are people. And they actually now have, I think it's a 6-story building right opposite that building now. And it's okay. It's interesting. But at Orca Place, we have the 24-hour staffing, and we have 51 units, and it's going well. It was built with a shelter on the bottom, but we were not allowed to. There was a whole process with the whole court case and everything, and then we were not allowed to put in the shelter. So in Oceanside, there still is not a shelter in that community. So it's very unfortunate, and we're working very hard to try and get that going, but that's the way it is. Next program that we have is Oceanside Outreach, and that started back in 2013 with some federal funding. And so it was just basically a way to try and come together and support in whatever way we could around trying to find housing. And it was a bit easier back then to find rental units. So what we did is we took on some leases. Island Crisis Care took on the leases for people who couldn't get their own leases. They didn't have the references. And so then we committed to the landlords that we would take on these leases and we would support the people so that they are able to maintain their housing. So we have outreach workers that work with them, and maybe they have a tendency to collect things. And hoarding can be quite an issue with people who've been on the streets because they value their stuff so much and they're so scared that they're going to lose it again. And so we work with them, just to make sure that it doesn't become an issue and that they are able to maintain their housing. Maybe they need supports with budgeting. We work with them, whatever their need is. And so coldest night of the year, I know this church has been amazing in being part of that, so we do it in Parksville as well. And through that funding is how we've been able to maintain this particular program, because all the grants and everything that we're applying for, they're always for a short term, and so it's always good if you've got something that you can kind of rely on. The next one is one of our newer programs that we've just started. It's called Project Rise. And what we were discovering is in our programs, people were ready for that next step. They wanted to, maybe they had been very successful. We have people who have been carpenters, who have worked as bakers, or so many different skills, artists, you name it. We've got people in our programs, like anywhere else, right, that they just fell on hard times and their life went awry, but yet in their background, they've got some of these skills, and we wanted to encourage them to get back on track and to become someone that's really contributing to society again. And so we noticed, as I say, that this was a gap. We didn't have any funding for it, so what could we do? So we started to really look at this, and we came up with this Project Rise program. And what it is, it's a work experience program for people often in our programs, but it could be outside as well. And we bring them into the classroom, and short periods, we found that a lot of our people were not successful in the traditional work experience programs, so we wanted to do something that was geared more for them. And so we bring them together. We've kind of gone between a few different time differences, 6 weeks or 8 weeks of classroom work, but just 4 hours a day. And again, building that community, because so much of it is about building that community, supporting one another and encouraging one another. After that time, they get their first aid, they get their food safe, they get their serving it right, like whatever it is that they're interested in. They have all these different skills coming together, and then they're ready to go out into the workforce. We have over 50 employers in the area who have committed to support us, and so we can then do some job interviews. They'll say, I'm interested in being, I don't know, a flagger or something. They want to work out on the roads. We've got a company that will come in and interview them and see if they think it's a good fit, and then they go out into an 8-week program of training, and then we support going through that. And I'm happy to say that majority of the people are then getting hired full-time afterwards, or maybe not full-time, but getting hired anyway. It might be a part-time position, but they are staying on often in their jobs, some of the different stores in town, and they're becoming very, very successful in the work that they're doing. So that's a real encouragement. The next one is the newest program that we have. It's called Life Skills for Community Connection. And this, again, came out of our noticing that there was a gap. So we decided that we would we found some people were not ready for that next step of Project Rise. There was a gap in there. So we needed to do something to give them the life skills to be ready for that next step. So I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to just kind of quickly go through this one. But it's just those skills that we kind of take for granted that they may not have. It could be something very, very simple, down to something bigger. But Alexis, who was in that first picture there, she works with people individually, and she'll put on classes. One of her very popular ones is sandwich making. She brings people together and they make sandwiches together. Sounds simple, right? But it's a life skill, and it's a way of building people so that they believe in themselves. So I want to share Matthew 25, 35 to 40. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these, of my brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So we all have a responsibility, don't we? I believe that God has called us all to certain tasks, but in looking through Scripture, there is so many references to helping the poor. Over 2,000, in fact. So what can you do to help? You may think that there's very little you can do, but there is something. First one is, I'm going to say pray. Please pray. There's so many needs out there. And if God's people are praying for these specific programs, for these specific needs, what a difference. Pray for our clients, for our residents that are trying so desperately to make changes. Pray for those that are not trying and they're not ready yet. Pray for our staff. I can't tell you how difficult it is for those frontline staff. The drugs that are out there now, the behaviors that is being seen, it's terrible. I mean, some of the violence, some of the behavior is really difficult. And pray for our volunteers. We have this amazing chaplaincy program that we just started as well. Please pray. The next one, be an advocate. Learn about the issues. Talk about it with your friends. And challenge wrong thinking. Be willing to stand up. You know, there are so many opportunities that we have, Island Crisis Care has. You know what the number one reason why we can't help is? Is community. Saying, I don't want that in my neighborhood. I don't want to have those people around here. They get so many, the council, the MPs, the MLAs, they get so many negative comments coming into their emails. You know, I hear from some of them how many times people will send them messages about don't do this and don't do that. But how many are coming in and saying, please help the people, please do something? Very few, I would say. So I want to put that challenge out to you. Think about, hey, I could message council and tell them that I want them to do something about the homelessness in our community. If they start getting those kind of responses, they're more likely to want to help, right, and to be able to do something, because they can say, well, I had 200 for and 200 against. You know, it makes it easier to do the right thing. So please be thinking about that. And volunteer. That's another way that you can help. Many opportunities. And, Donate is another way. You can participate in many of the different ways. The monthly, the Blue Bank campaign, which comes up in the fall, third-party events and fundraising. Whatever it is, there's many ways that you can support. And here's my very favorite one, the next one. You can shop at the Nanaimo Bakery. For those of you who don't know, part of our whole thing around the Project Rise and trying to find funding was we purchased, so it's a whole long complicated thing that I won't go into, but we purchased the Nanaimo Bakery, and it now is a social purpose company. So what that means is when you go and buy your loaf of bread, or you go there and you eat your eggs Benedict, or whatever it is that you're going there for, buy your coffee, you are supporting the work of ICCS. And so that's a way that you can really make a difference. It's all preservative-free. It's all made every day. It's a great way. We have several people from our Project Rise that are working there and learning baking skills. It really is a great way. And we're not making money. We're not there yet. But I know soon we will, because we're definitely on the way up. And so I really believe that if people knew what it is that we were doing, because I still don't think we've got the word out there enough, so there's another challenge for you. Tell people about the Nanaimo Bakery. Tell them what a difference they can, if they're concerned about homelessness in their area, if they're concerned about what they're seeing downtown, tell them, here's one way you can help. You can support the Nanaimo Bakery. So I want to end with Psalm 41. Blessed is he who considers the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he will be blessed on the earth. You will not deliver him to the will of his enemies. The Lord will strengthen him on his bed of illness. You will sustain him on his sickbed. What a beautiful promise for those who consider the poor. Now remember that it's not about that we must serve, because it's not a condition of salvation. It's a response to the beautiful gift of salvation that we've been given. Let's pray together. Father, thank you that you consider us and that you care so much, Lord, about us, but also about those in our community who are struggling. And so, Lord, I pray that you will just somehow rise up in us a people who are willing to make a stand for you. Rise up and help us to be all that you want us to be. Lord, I thank you for Hammond Bay Church, and I thank you for everyone here who is already doing so much. But Lord, just help us to be servants.